Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are taking a look at the Bloodhunter. Now, the Bloodhunter is a really cool build. It's one I created a while ago with, I don't even remember, one of the DLCs. And the theme or idea of it is it's a hunter of, kind of similar to the Slayer. You know, it's meant to hunt the supernatural, the undead, witches. But it is based loosely on the Bloodhunter from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition that was created by the Critical Role cast. One of the creators for Critical Role, Matthew Mercer, originally for Vin Diesel to play when the Witch Hunter movie came out. The Last Witch Hunter. So it is based on that, and it's kind of, I didn't want to call it the Witch Hunter, and Bloodhunter is what they changed the name to for D&D because of the fact that they use this kind of magic, and it's kind of like an ancient magic that's really blood related. So this plays into that as well, and I really like that the class and just the class really plays into that idea, that theme. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Here we are, the Bloodhunter. This is a Redguard Nightblade. Now, again, with these builds that I've been releasing, almost any race will be perfect for it. It just depends on how much more of certain attributes you're looking for, or how much recovery you're looking for versus other things. It really plays into that idea. So as you can see, we have 14 points in the Magicka, 50 in the Stamina. This gives us a well-rounded amount of attributes between our Magicka and Health and Stamina. But mostly we want our Magicka and Stamina to be pretty high so we can take advantage of those high pools. And then our weapon damage and spell damage is coming in at 1700 spell damage, 2618 weapon damage. We do have a 43% weapon critical, 28% spell critical. 692 mag recovery, 394 health recovery, and 1,201 stam recovery. And this build plays really well with what it does. So, just being clear on that. Alright, moving on. We do have the Thief Mundus Stone, and of course, Tri-Stat Food. Moving on now to the equipment, starting with food and drinks and potions. So, this build primarily uses Tri-Stat Pots. And it can use warrior power pots, it can use the Magicka power pots, depending on roles, and you can also use the grapes and ash yam food, falafel, for max Magicka, max stamina, and you can lower your health. It really depends on your ability to play the build. And then longfin pasty and melon sauce is going to be your tri-stat food. And there is other foods you can use, depending on the role, again, that you're playing. Witch Mother's Potent Brew if you're playing more of a healer type. If you're going for more stamina in your build and you're not using as many as the magic abilities as I am, you can trade off. So there's a lot of things you can do here. Alright, so moving on to sets, starting with the monster head. And you'll notice that this mimics kind of what the vampire setup was running, and that's because Melibeth's is a really good set for somebody who is gonna be in the midst of combat, either by themselves in solo play or even in group play, for when you take damage. So if you take damage with this, it's where it shines. So the 1-piece max health, 2-piece when you take damage you have a 10% chance to create a beam that steals 7,137 health from your enemy over 4 seconds. And then while the beam holds, you gain major vitality, increasing your healing received by 30%. The beam breaks if the enemy moves further than 8 meters away. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. So, the set itself is really good for survivability. The purpose of survivability. And you can use other sets too. Veladrith's is a good set to use with this if you want to go for more DPS. You can go with, Krogs, you can go with Selene, you can go with Silatrex, you can go with pretty much any set that gives you DPS advantage. You can use those. You can use any of those sets. The reason for me in this is because this is like again I said, this is kind of like that blood magic feel, like you're going to use blood magic to sustain yourself while you're fighting your enemies, so it kind of plays into that theme. The next set we are using is Hunting's Rage. Most people are going to say, why do you only use these sets? I'm going to actually do a whole video talking about why I use certain crafted sets a lot versus other sets, but that's for another video. So Hunting's Rage, really good. 4-piece critical, 3-piece max stamina, 5-piece is just pure weapon damage, and you get that for everything, so it's really good for that. Now the next set is one that is going to throw people off because it's not your typical set you would see on something. In most cases, unless you were playing a really high-end Magicka DPS, and you were playing in either PvP, where you got to get high spell penetration, where you're going to build for that, because a lot of people build for high resistances there, or in PvE for the same reason, so you can reach those resistance caps really easy. And that is Spinner's set. The Spinner set is actually a really good set for this build. Primarily because you're not building for really high spell crit to create damage necessarily, but that higher spell penetration does allow for greater spell penetration, which it does increase your damage with those abilities. You don't need a super high crit because, again, even with the lower crit, the 28%, you still crit quite often, a lot more often than people think, with the abilities you use. So 2 and 3-piece max magicka, 4-piece spell damage, 5-piece spell penetration, and it's a lot of spell penetration. It's 3,450. Now, going over the traits and enchants on the gear. So on the helm and the legs, you guys guessed it, invigorating. That's a given for me. Mainly because I really like having that sustain, that little bit of extra sustain. I know it doesn't seem like much, but depending on what food you're using, depending on what other things you might be using, it does play into your recovery rates, and it does play into that whole premise of, hey, I need a little extra for these reasons. The heavy piece is our chest, and then we're going to have that reinforced. That's another given. Anytime I do a 5-1-1 setup, I always do a heavy piece that has reinforced on it, and that's to increase our survivability. Now, you don't have to do these trait setups if you don't want to. If you want to go all divines to make this more DPS heavy, you can. It will increase your crit chance because you're using the Thief Mundus Stone, and that's good. So it's really up to the player. And then on the enchants here, on the big pieces, the helm, the chest, and legs, we are using tri-stats. Again, that's to maximize magicka health and stamina. And just like with the Slayer, we did do the split. Magicka, stamina on the small pieces, on the divines and divines. So the small pieces are all divines. And that's the shoulder, the gloves, the belt, and the boots. And that's to give us a good amount of extra from our Mundus Stone. And then for the split stats, it's so we can build out in those higher stamina magicka pools depending on how we play the build. So if you build this build, say, as a high elf, you're going to be playing with more magicka, but you can also have this same stat layout with the high elf because you get 2,000 extra magicka. So you don't have to put any points in magicka, you just dump it all into stamina. And you'll end up with a pretty close similarity to this build. So it works out either way you play it. And then also playing a high elf, you get that increased spell damage, which does play into your capabilities. Alright, so moving on to the jewelry now, of course, 2 tri-rune with weapon damage. Now you can go weapon damage, 1 weapon damage, 1 spell damage if you want, but you do want to keep that higher weapon damage because that's what you focus on a lot more, is more stamina-based damage, with magic damage being applied to other forces, other means. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the weapon damage does play a little bit better into this. The tri-rune rings, of course, to split up those stats. Now, if you were running this without the tri-rune, it would be all Arcana, which is also fine. Arcana runes would give you that higher magicka pool. You wouldn't put anything into stamina or magicka, then it would just all go into stamina. So you could do that. But because we're using the tri-rune traits, it's going to give us that mix of health, magic, and stamina. The last piece, we are using a necklace with a stamina recovery. Infused, that's going to give us higher stamina recovery, and it's going to give us more, more benefit to our stamina recovery. Now, this is an optional thing. You don't have to use the stamina recovery here. There are a lot of other options you can use. Moving on to the weapons now, we are using both the sword and bow from the spinner set. And the sword is infused with a crusher enchant. Now you're going to notice that this build uses a lot of things that gives you a lot of spell penetration and a lot of physical penetration. There is a reason that I built this build to work that way. And it's primarily to boost the amount of damage you can do with this build, both magic and stamina, but at the same time, it gives you that flexibility to where you can take advantage of that higher spell or physical penetration in different moments against different enemies for different reasons. But whenever you use your carve ability, you do apply Crusher to all enemies you hit, and it stays applied for a little while because you are using infused, and that's a decent amount of spell and physical penetration. Moving on to the back bar, another given infused weapon spell damage. This is going to enhance your ability to deal damage both physically and with spell, so you want that higher amount, and infused is going to do that. Excuse me. Alright, now moving on now to our skills. And just like with everything, remember, I'm going to show you the skills I use for the build. And you can either choose to use these or not. This is just kind of like how I would run the build if I was playing in more of a solo overland kind of experience. Not so much playing in a dungeon. Not so much playing in a trial. Because there would be other setups that might be better for those situations. And that type of play. So it really comes down to it. And then I'll show you also the other skills I have unlocked for the class, the weapon skills, armor, all that stuff when we get done with what we have equipped. So what we have on our bar here is, starting with our first ability, we have Wrecking Blow. Now you can use Dizzying Swing as well. Dizzying Swing is a great ability because it does knock the person off balance and everything like that. The reason I like Wrecking Blow though is because, one, it deals a lot of damage, but then it grants you Empower for the next 5 seconds, increasing the damage of your next light attack by 40%. So you're going to go Wrecking Blow, light attack right afterwards. So you get that 40% extra damage in that light attack. And you're going to, basically the way the rotation works is when you get to the part where you're doing your, what they call your spammable. This is your spammable. So you're going to do this, light attack, do this, light attack, do this, light attack, swap bars. So you're going to do 3 Wrecking Blows with 3 light attacks in between. Moving on to the next ability, we have Swallow Soul. Now, Swallow Soul is a really good ability, but it's primarily meant for you. So it doesn't heal anyone else, it just heals you. It does deal a decent amount of magic damage, and it heals you for 40% of the damage inflicted every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So this is a great way to inflict high damage on your enemies, and then get that kind of soul siphoning back. You can get some of that resource back to keep yourself sustained and alive. Next ability we have is Carve, and we have this here because it deals damage up front, it deals damage over 10 seconds, and this helps keep that Crusher applied. So that's a really important thing there. Now, the next ability we have is called Power Extraction. Power Extraction deals disease damage to everything around you. And then, if an enemy is hit, you reduce their weapon and spell damage by 200 for 8 seconds. And you gain Major Brutality and Sorcery, increasing your own weapon and spell damage by 20% for that 20 seconds. Or for 20 seconds. So this is a really good ability for group play, even solo play, because you get to reduce that incoming damage you would take from both spell and physical in a really powerful way. So it's a great AoE. It's another great spammable that you can use in AoE combat, especially in trash packs. I like to use what I call Carve light attack, power extraction, light attack, power extraction, light attack, power extraction, instead of using Wrecking Blow when I'm fighting trash in dungeon, because you can just clear mobs this way really fast, because you have 2 dots going from these 2 abilities, and this just plays into it a little bit more. Last but not least is our Execute, and it is an Execute. It is called Executioner Strike. And this one, you spin and strike the enemy down, dealing X amount of physical damage, deals up to 400% more damage to enemies with less than 50% health. So this becomes a what is considered an Execute. So the more you hit the enemy below 50% health, the more damage you deal. And it will deal extensively more damage. So it does only affect a single target, but this is kind of plays into that whole idea. You're a hunter. When you go into a fight, you're going to pick one target to focus on, even though you can hit multiple targets. That main target you're focused on is the one that you want to kill the fastest. So even playing as a DPS, it plays into that theme of, hey, my character's role is to focus damage on certain targets that are affecting the most problem. So it's a really good trade-off, and it's a really good Execute. You also have Killer's Blade that you can use, but I do think that Executioner Strike plays better into the idea of a 2-handed build. Next up, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. Great ability, deals damage up front, deals damage over 6 seconds, and after activating it, you get another 300 increase of weapon damage. Now, you're going to say, you're not getting a lot of spell damage here, except from power extraction and the enchant. But you got to remember, that you're getting that enchant increase to 1700 spell damage on the front bar. And then on top of that, you're getting an extra 400 and something, and then you're increasing that by 20%, which is going to take it above 2700 spell damage. So it really plays well into that Swallow Soul concept. Now, moving on to the back bar, it's where things get a little bit more interesting, because on the back bar you have Venom Arrow, which is this poison damage up front, poison damage over time. It can also interrupt, send enemies off balance, and stun them for 3 seconds if they're casting an ability. You also have Endless Hail, which is a great damage over time, and it lasts for 14 seconds. It does have a smaller radius than Arrow Barrage, but it does have a greater length of time, so it gives you that greater damage over time. The next ability, remember what I was talking about where you pick one target? That's where this plays into play, and that is the Reaper's Mark. Now, this does afflict the Major Fracture, Major Breach, reducing spell and physical resist by 5,280 for 20 seconds. When a marked target dies, you heal for 16,285 and gain Major Berserk, increasing your damage done by 25% for 5 seconds. This portion of the ability scales off your max health. You can only have one Reaper's Mark active at a time. And then the next ability, and this plays really big into the idea that you're a hunter. You know that when you go into an environment, you're looking for specific targets that you want to kill. So even in a dungeon, like, you can help the tank by keeping this applied to certain mobs, trash mobs, because the tank's going to be focused on this. You can target them, get them with that Major Breach and Major Fracture. Everyone can focus on killing them faster, and then you can go back to fighting the boss, which you don't have to use this then. But you can also keep it applied for the boss as well, because of the fact that if the enemy dies, or an enemy dies when it's attached, including the boss, it's going to give you health no matter what. So really good trade-off there. Next ability we have, and this is a really cool one, it is called Refreshing Path. Now this one creates a corridor of shadows, granting you and your allies in the area major expedition, increasing movement speed by 30%. The effect persists for 4 seconds after leaving the path, and everyone who's in the path, in the area, is healed for so much health to you and your allies in the area every second for 1 second. So for the duration of 12 seconds, that's 1 second, you're going to heal for 1245. And if you do the math, it actually comes to almost 10,000 health. Or over 10,000 health, almost 15,000 health, in fact, over that duration. It's a really, really powerful heal. And it's a really good way to help your healers, to help your group get into combat quicker and faster. Remember, you mark a target, you're going after them. So this allows that quicker play. Then on top of that, you have the next one, Leeching Strikes. Now this is a great way for stamina sustain and another heal for yourself. Now remember, your person calls upon this ancient blood magic that allows you to stay in the fight and stay healthy. Well, you've got to have, you've got to have something that does that, and this plays into that. So every light and heavy attack you deal heals you, and it restores stamina. Now, fully charged heavy attacks restore twice the value of health and stamina. So if you are suffering, you can do a really strong heavy attack. And then remember, if you have Melibeths going, because you've taken damage from an AoE or whatever, and you got that beam attached to that boss or that, certain mobs in the encounter, and you do damage, you do that heavy attack, you're going to get 30% more health from that healing. So it's another way of looking at how all this stuff interacts together. All the stat bonuses, the skills and all that stuff interact into the character itself to give you this greater kind of playability and ability to play this build. Now you will almost be at max spell and physical penetration. Well, definitely spell penetration when you're fighting mobs in the overland, but you won't be there for physical penetration. You're just not quite there. But you do have enough that gives you a greater output of damage. That's why we have higher weapon damage and not as high as spell damage, because we get a lot of spell penetration because of the spinner set. That's where we kind of do that trade-off. We don't have high crit, but we have high penetration. So that gives us that greater capability to use some of our magic abilities if we need to. And we do have other magic abilities within the class. So that's where we're going to go to now, is the skills we have unlocked. And before that, though, I do have to talk about the last ultimate, and that is our Veil of Blades. Now, this is an amazing ability. A lot of people don't use this ability a lot. One, you conjure a shadow, reducing movement speed to enemies by 70%. It deals magic damage every second for the duration, and granting you and your allies major protection, reducing your incoming damage by 30%. This is a great ability, because one, it does protection, two, it does healing, or it does the movement speed, and it does the damage. So it gives you all three of these things. But then it has a final thing, which is a synergy. Allies in the area can activate the Hidden Refresh synergy, granting them invisibility, increasing their movement speed by 70%, and healing them for 24,543 health over 4 seconds. Great support skill, great damage skill, great pretty much anything skill. And remember, all ultimates scale off your highest attribute. So it's max magicka or max stamina. In this case, it's max stamina. And weapon damage. So this thing's going to scale with the higher your weapon damage is and the higher your max stamina is. Really good. So now going over the rest of our abilities. You do have incapacitating strikes. This is a great disease damage ability. It's a really fast casting ability, and it gets more power the more ultimate you have, over 120, which is good. Killer's Blade, another great execute. You also have Ambush, which is a great teleport attack, and it does apply minor vulnerability to the enemy, increasing their damage taken by 8%, and it gives you Empower as well, so you can swap this out for the two-handed ability if you want to, and then that way you can use Power Extraction as more of your spammable. It's really up to you. There is the next ability, Mirage. This is a great ability for boosting your spell and physical resist and stuff like that by 25%, or gives you minor resolve, increasing your or reducing your area attack damage by 20%, and gives you that physical spell resist increase by 1320 for 10 seconds or 26 seconds. It's just a great buff. Then, of course, we have that Reaper's Mark, which I already explained. Really good ability. And then you have Relentless Focus if you want to use this as a really high power damage ability. It does require so many stacks of light attacks. And also make sure you do get your class passives, all of them. Moving on to the Shadow line. Veil of Blades, already discussed it. Surprise Attack is another great ability. It's a good spammable. but it's more of a thing that you want to use from while flanking an enemy. It's better to use when stealthing, stuff like that. So it really depends on where you like what how you use this and stuff like that. But it is a really powerful spammable ability. Then of course we have Dark Cloak, great heal, also grants you minor protection. We have the Refreshing Path, again, really great ability. This also boosts your resistances because of one of the passives in the Nightblade skill line. We have Mass Hysteria, great way to scare enemies off and stuff like that. We also have Shadow Image, another great ability for giving you a way of getting around because you can use this shade to teleport and stuff like that. It's really crazy. And then, of course, the passives down here. Siphoning, Ultimate, Soul Tether, really good heal and magic damage ability. We do have the Swallow Soul, another, I already explained it, really good ability. We have Shrewd Offering. Now this is a really cool ability because this gives you a way of healing allies by sacrificing your own health. Now it is a heal over time, and a lot of the things about this, about the Nightblade, is about either damage over time or healing over time, or burst stuff. So the next ability besides Shrewd Offering is our Crippling Grasp. Now this is a really good ability because it deals magic damage. Up front, it deals damage over 10 seconds, and then it also immobilizes enemies for 2 seconds, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. And then we have Leeching Strikes, of course, and then, of course, Power Extraction, and our passives. Moving on to weapon skills. Two-handed. This is our primary weapon we can use. You can use one-handed sword and shield, dual wield, and bow, of course. You can learn any of these you want. But I chose the two-handed as my primary weapon because of the way it would play into fighting. Like I said, you're a hunter. You've got to be able to take on that single enemy, but you also got to be able to take on other enemies that might be aiding that vampire lord, that werewolf lord, that whatever you're fighting, that witch and her covenant. So you want to be able to fight them all. So using the two-handed, you get a lot of cleave attacks. So Berserker's Rage is a single target damage ability, but it's a very powerful ability. It increases your physical and spell resist for whatever their physical and spell resist is. So it's a good ultimate for that. You got Wrecking Blow. I already explained this. Stampede is a great AoE damage ability. You charge the enemy, dealing physical damage, and then you deal physical damage every second for 10 seconds in the area. So it's really good for that. We have Carve, great damage up front, great damage over time, and it keeps your Crusher enchant applied. Really great for that. Executioner Strike, I already explained it, really good for what it does. And then we have Rally, which is a good burst heal, but it also gives you Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage, and it gives you Minor Endurance, increasing stam recovery. So this is a really good one to have if you want that extra oomph on your character for that. If you do use this, I would suggest either swapping out Swallow Soul or Power Extraction. One of the two. Moving on to Bow now. And make sure you get the passives to these. So Ballista, great ability. You can drop this, walk away, and it keeps firing while you're still doing your rotation. I like this. The poison one is really good too. It does a lot of damage. Next, we have Focused Aim. And if you want to get that minor fracture, reducing physical resist by 1320 for 10 seconds. This is a great ability to use for that. It gives you that greater physical penetration. It just makes killing things a little bit quicker. Next up, we do have Endless Hail. And then, of course, we have Draining Shot. This is a great way to get some health whenever you deal damage. And it also reduces movement speed. And it's a burst heal. So it's really good. Then we have Acid Spray. This is really good. It deals damage to the enemy, and then it deals damage over 4 seconds to everything it hits. So multiple targets, really good for AoE trash packs, or for dealing with trash packs. And then, of course, we have Venom Arrow. Moving on to our medium armor, we are using Elude as our skill there. And then moving on to world skills. Now, Soul Magic has some great abilities. So it has Soul Assault, which is a great damage over time ability. It is an ultimate, and it is probably one of the most powerful damage ultimates in the game for channel damage, because it is over 6 seconds. And enemies affected by this ability are revealed for 3 seconds. It works out really good in PvP, but it also helps in PvE when you're fighting like vampires and other things to keep them seen, because they can go into stealth. Next, we have Consuming Trap. It's a great resource retention ability. You apply this to the enemy, it deals physical damage over 10 seconds, and then it gives you, it heals you, gives you magicka and stamina when the effect wears off. So, or when you kill the enemy and you take its soul. So, next we have the Shatter Soul, Soul Summons, and Soul Lock. Really good abilities there, or passives. Now, Fighter's Guild, Flawless Dawnbreaker, Silver Leash. This is to pull enemies to you if you're tanking, maybe if you just need that extra in your group to get enemies to you faster. Turn Evil, another great ability. It's like Mass Hysteria, but it also gives you minor protection and minor endurance. So you get this area of protection, and you get this area of stamina recovery. It's kind of a nice ability, but then of course it also makes the enemies feared for 5 seconds. So, and it costs stamina, so that's kind of not too bad. We also have Camouflaged Hunter. This is another great ability because it can give you Major Berserk, and it also gives you the Major Savagery, increasing weapon damage or weapon critical. Then we have Barb Trap, great source of minor force and damage together. And then of course the passives. Mage's Guild, Ice Comet, great ability. Inner Light, great ability for magicka resource. Structured Entropy is a great ability for damage and a heal. Scalding Ruin is another really good ability. Actually, it's kind of like setting a trap that you pull enemies into. So if you're doing a pull in a room, you throw this down in front of you, pull the enemies into it, and make them walk through it. And then of course we do have Balance. Really good way of just kind of giving yourself major resolve, which increases both physical and spell resist. But it does reduce your healing and shield strength by 50% while it's active for 4 seconds. So you get that 4 seconds, but you get that 30 seconds of major resolve. So that's kind of nice. And you do exchange your health for magicka. So it's kind of like that if you need more magicka kind of thing. And then of course the passives. Psijic Order, same thing. Active abilities and ultimates and passives. So ultimates, Temple Guard, really good for PvP. Time Freeze is a really good AoE kind of stun. Then you have Crushing Weapon, you have Race Against Time, Mint Spirit, and Deep Thoughts. Undaunted, Sanguine Altar, Tangling Webs, Inner Beast, Spike Bone Shield, and Mystic Orb. Now, you notice how I kind of just stopped explaining what abilities do there? I want to just get through them. So moving on to the Alliance War. Assault, Aggressive Horn, Echoing Vigor, and Razor Caltrops. And then in the support sign, Reviving Barrier, Efficient Purge, and the Stalwart Guard. And then of course we are a Red Guard, so you do get the Martial Training. This reduces the cost of your weapon abilities by 8% and reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%. You get Conditioning, which increases your max stamina by 200 or 2,000, and then you get Adrenaline Rush. When you deal direct damage, you restore 950 stamina, and this effect can occur every 5 seconds. That's almost 1,000 stamina every 5 seconds. Alchemy, Medicinal Use, and then Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. And you guys will probably notice I do have these certain ones unlocked, but that's just so I can craft armor at its highest material and its highest temper. So it's just easier for me to craft with. And that is our skills. Moving on now to CP, we're going to bust through these really fast. So starting with the Red Tree. We have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken by direct damage attacks by 20%. We have 18 in medium armor focus, increasing your physical resistance by 1729 for wearing 5 pieces or more. 20 in a spell shield, increasing your spell resistance by 1900. Moving on down over here, we have 31 in the thick skin. This increases your damage taken from damage over time effects, or reduces your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. We have 43 in a hardy and Elemental Defender. Both of these basically reduce physical, poison, disease damage on one, and Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage on the other. But because we have 43 in both of these, that's 10% less damage you take from them. Moving on over here, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of damage shields you apply to yourself by 16%, And then 19 into quick recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. Now, a lot of people are going to notice I have Bastion, but I didn't have any shields equipped. That's, again, situational play. I like being ready for anything. That's why I use this kind of universal setup. Moving on over to the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%, 16 into Sprinter, reducing the cost of sprint by 10%, 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 75 into Mooncalf. This increases your stam recovery by 14%, and then 43 in Arcanist, increasing your mag recovery by 10%. Final green tree, we have 40 into Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%, 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing the block cost by 16%. And then moving on to the final tree, the blue tree, or the Mage's tree, and we are going over this stuff. So 43 into Blast, this increases your healing done by 10%. We do have 23 into Elfborn. This increases your critical damage, critical healing with magic abilities by 10%. 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. And then moving on to the middle here, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases the damage of your two-handed, one-handed sword and shield, dual-wield bow weapons, and werewolf form by 20%. And then we have 40 into Mastered Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage by 16%. Last but not least, the final blue tree, we have 43 into Mighty, increasing your physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%, and then 20 into Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. So overall, you get a really good balance of stuff with this character and with everything pretty much. It really does allow for a lot of flexibility. And let's go ahead and see what it's like in combat so you guys can see for yourselves. So I'm going to be playing this as, like I said, I would in Overland. Or if I was just playing the game, doing quests as normal or whatever, and I'm just trying to get things done. Now, in a dungeon, in a trial, you know, like, depending on that situation, I might use a lot of different things, a lot of different tools, just because. Just gonna go ahead and let them do that. And they're all dead. And then the other thing that's nice about Refreshing Path is it does allow you to move in combat really well. And if you notice, I'm just like focusing. I'm not even really trying to focus with my Reaper's Mark because this is trash. I don't really need to focus too much. But if I was going to focus, the first enemy I would have actually went after is the Archer in the back. Because of the way that the Archer would do just a ton of damage. So you notice how I'm using my light attacks with my bow to kind of keep myself healed. That is kind of the point here. It's like you want to be able to do that. That stuff that's going to keep you alive. It's kind of the whole premise of playing in solo anyways is you got to use the tools that you can to help keep yourself alive, but at the same time you know that you're going to have a lot of burst damage that you're going to want to do, and if you notice I'll be using that path a lot. Oh, I don't even know. I am totally off here on my rotation. And you know, if you notice, I haven't really used much potions either, and that's mainly because I just don't need to focus so much on using potions all the time. I am going to go ahead and let him kill me, because I can kill this guy. I've already soloed him once with this character. But it is, like I said, it's a very powerful kind of build that you wouldn't normally, you know, see a lot of people running this kind of thing. But it does work out really well. The thematic play of it works really well for what it does, being this person who hunts the supernatural, the mages, or evil necromancers, witches, werewolves, evil dark fae, you know, you name it, just any of that stuff. That's what they're hired to do, is go hunt those things. And just like a Slayer's hired to hunt any kind of monster, these ones are hired to hunt this particular kind of thing, these kind of supernatural beings, and to kind of a mix, because they kind of use some of this ancient blood magic to fight against them, which is kind of vampiric, but at the same time it's just kind of who they are. And I really love this playstyle. I actually play this on live with one of my Nightblades, and I love playing it. It's like my favorite character to play when I just want to just get out and just really bust through some content, or I'm just in the mood for it. I play it a lot, and I really love it. I think it's one of the more fun builds that I have. So, but that's pretty much it for the Bloodhunter, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.